This is the lecture on the communicable disease programs of the Department of Health. And our objectives for this lecture will be discussing the global burden of leading communicable diseases according to statistics highlighted by the IHME and the Department of Health, run through a general overview of the Department of Health's health programs with a focus on communicable diseases, discuss each disease health program according to sections that include the program's general overview, description, mission, vision, objectives, policies and laws, accomplishments, status, action points, and partner agencies or aid sources. Now, let me tell you, these are not always complete. Some of the programs may not even have a mission vision. Some don't even have accomplishments or status reports. There are two reasons for this. First is that the DOH website had a migration slash renovation that started last year, and you will notice that some of the mission vision uh, will be incongruous with the current time. And second, because of Department Order 2022-0423, which restructured the Department of Health, the organization itself no longer has vertical programs where there are specific personnel or staff in charge of a program, but instead, multiple people are handling different programs or different aspects of programs through the scheme of integrated health services. So, what are the bases for the existence of programs for infectious diseases? So programs are brought into existence with good justification, ideally because they use public resources. And you have to allocate these properly. So you have to use proper data, proper evidence. You have to cite evidence and cite data to ensure that the resources are used well. Okay, and not just because these come from taxpayer money, but it also comes from aid money, and you have to and the aid money that comes from foreign sources, uh, they they need to show the effects that the aid they are giving is actually beneficial to the country. Okay. So the sources for this lecture come generally from the International Institute for Health Metrics and Evaluation. It's a research institute working in the area of global health statistics and impact evaluation at the University of Washington in Seattle. It gathers health-related data and develops analytical tools to visualize and tabulate all of these findings into easy to parse and easy to understand bits. Okay, so it's big data but for health. And uh, one of the things that we can conclude with regards to our health data is that we as a country are a mixture of developing and developed nation traits for with regards to the burden of disease. So the last time this was done with the IHME, COVID-19 was the leading cause of death. It dethroned uh, perpetual number one, ischemic heart disease. Uh, and you'll notice that three of the top 10 here in the IHME are infectious diseases. So you have your COVID-19, you have your lower respiratory tract disorders, and you have your tuberculosis. The rest are non-communicable diseases. But after 2021, there was a shift in priorities of what is getting tracked. We were no longer doing the usual tracking on the number of COVID-19 cases on a national level. So ischemic heart disease went back to being number one. And now neoplasms and other cerebrovascular diseases, so neoplasms have now overtaken our cerebrovascular diseases. Meanwhile, pneumonia is our top infectious disease. But it's interesting because it doesn't say whether what kind of pneumonia we are dealing with, whether it's viral or bacterial, or if this pneumonia may actually be because of COVID-19. Okay, and you have tuberculosis also up there in our top 10. So little by little, the old infectious diseases as the leading cause of death in the Philippines already already being replaced by non-communicable diseases, and yet we still have a lot of infectious diseases that need to be dealt with. So overall, the ones overseeing the health sector, the national agency with authority over all matters healthcare, is the Department of Health. It is a policy-making and regulatory institution. And its major roles include the leadership in health, enabler and capacity builder for the health sector, because not all things health sector are under the purview of the Department of Health. So let's say, for example, our medical centers. Sure, there are DOH medical centers like East Avenue Medical Center, Jose Reyes Memorial Medical Center, which is beside the Department of Health Central Office, Quirino Memorial Medical Center, Abang Rodriguez Memorial Medical Center, where some of you will be rotating when you are in your fourth year as medical students. Okay, because I know this not because I rotated there. I'm actually not from around these parts, but because I know some of my batchmates in residency who came from UE told me that they also went through Amang Rodriguez. Okay, and I think some will be going to Quirino Memorial Medical Center for their government medical center exposure. Okay, so what happens is you have your DOH medical centers, but you also have your local government unit medical centers. So off the top of our head, there are three that I can easily think of here in Metro Manila: Quezon City General Hospital, Hospital ng Maynila. You have your San Juan Medical Center. Uh, Usually, if it's a big city or a rich province, they have the capacity to have their own medical center. Hospital na Makati, okay? In Marinduque, they have the Marinduque Provincial Hospital. So it's a local government unit hospital. It's not a medical center, okay? And then you have your other hospitals that are under different government agencies. Like, for example, with the Department of National Defense, you have your Veterans Memorial Medical Center in North Avenue, the AFP Medical Center in V. Luna Avenue, even law enforcement with the PNP General Hospital in Camp Crame. They also have their own healthcare facility. And your state colleges and universities such as West Visayas State University and the University of the Philippines also have their own medical centers, and and respectively, these are the West Visayas State University Medical Center and the Philippine General Hospital. So the DOH's function is to help enable through transfer of either funding for health facilities enhancement or to build capacities, particularly for those that are not actually in healthcare, like for example the Department of National Defense or the PNP General Hospital. They are primarily meant to serve a specific part of our uniformed forces. So you have to capacitate. You have to give capabilities to those, and the DOH is the one responsible, the one with the mandate for that. It is also an administrator of specific services in health on a national level. So, like I said, some medical centers belong to the DOH, and they administer or they oversee these specific services in health. But because of a Supreme Court ruling with regards to the LGU Code of 1991, service delivery might be passed more and more to the local government units. And the Department of Health develops national plans, technical standards, and guidelines on health. So you can see that it's becoming fast the central clearinghouse for for all things all things um, clinical, okay, and it provides special tertiary healthcare services and technical assistance to various health providers and stakeholders. For our lecture today, all of the programs are under the Infectious Diseases Division of the Disease Prevention and Control Bureau. So the Disease Prevention and Control Bureau is under the Public Health Services cluster. Now, I don't expect you to know this or where it is in relation to what in the organizational chart of the DOH. It's there in the website, but always remember the organizational chart depends on whoever is president, so whoever is the chief executive, whoever is the health secretary, and sometimes even whatever is in the mind of the health secretary. Like, for example, the health secretary feels that the current approach is lacking and wants to reorganize again. He or she will place certain divisions and certain bureaus under different teams, under different assistant secretaries or under secretaries. For the DOH Disease Prevention and Control Bureau's Infectious Disease Division, you have your tuberculosis, dengue, rabies, malaria, filariasis, schistosomiasis, national leprosy control, HIV/AIDS and sexually transmitted infections, floodwater diseases, and emerging and re-emerging infectious disease programs. So let's have a segue first. What is the difference between policy versus what is regulation? So regulation, if we think about games that we play, so our leisure activities, regulation are the rules we have whenever we play games. So let's take chess for example. All of the pieces have rules as to how they can move across the board. Or if you play role-playing games such as Dungeons and Dragons, one of the rules or one of the primary rule, the rule that doesn't that basically gets followed is that the word of the dungeon master or the game master is final. Okay, so you can role play all you want, but if the dungeon master says that this is what happens next, you will have to role play your way around that. Meanwhile, policy is your approach towards how you play the game. So policy is, for example, in back to chess, you may be an aggressive player who wants to control as much of the board as quickly as possible, or you are thinking several steps ahead and want to ensure that your king is always covered or always away from possible checks by the other pieces of your opponent. And for Dungeons and Dragons, your policy could be you are mostly a combat type of player, so you min-max, you maximize your traits, your skills, and your abilities towards certain 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 features so that it ensures that whenever you roll the dice, even with the bonuses, you max out on whatever damage or whatever effects can be brought about by your character, while basically sacrificing other stats or other abilities because in your part you don't care about those abilities, whereas other people play Dungeons and Dragons for the love of role playing, like they want to create a complex character. Okay, so that is where we go with regards to laws versus issuances. Okay, so laws themselves are the rules, okay, our society has, and the The most important law, the one that establishes our social contract, is the 1987 Constitution that was brought about after the EDSA People Power Revolution. All laws after that was passed, after the 1987 EDSA Revolution, are are based on that constitution. So the Republic Act, uh, laws that are passed by the legislative branch of government, so the Congress and the Senate, before being signed by the President, need to have a basis in our constitution. And they are usually like vision missions and goals. They're usually vague enough so that when a judge interprets them, there is a bit of wiggle room. Okay, so you can't have a law that says that you can, let's say, national mandatory vaccine law. Okay, this is an absurd law. It probably goes against our constitutional rights to choose, goes against civil liberties. But let's say a law is passed and somehow nobody has challenged it yet in the judiciary. Okay, so what happens is um, if it is passed that way, that there's a specific provision that you can all kids need to be vaccinated only on Monday. Sorry, all kids need to be vaccinated on Mondays. Some some judges might consider that it only means that you can vaccinate kids on Monday, or some judges will interpret that as everyone considered a minor, regardless of their vaccine status, need to report and need to be vaccinated on Mondays. Okay? So that's the problem. So you have to be wide in your scope. And if you want to be specific, you have implementing rules and regulations, or what are known as the IRR. Then you have your presidential decrees. Okay, so before the 1987 Constitution, there are some issues that enter the national consciousness, that enter national attention, that need to be dealt with immediately by the executive branch. So they issue presidential decrees because they cannot wait for a law from Congress. And a lot of times, particularly with the sanitation code of the Philippines, these usually need an update, okay? Because they are very, very specific. Like, how much do you penalize? And the penalty is usually at the maximum of hundreds of pesos, which is now loose change for much of the middle class. And then after the 1987 Constitution, you have your executive orders, which are passed by the president, and these can be easily challenged in court. Okay, so there's a reason why the executive secretary, that's what they're for, because they're the ones who come up with the executive orders. Uh, they are usually Top Gun lawyers. Okay? There's a reason why the current executive secretary, Lucas Bersamin, is a former Supreme Court justice. It's because they have to be very good at what they do. They have to be one-stop shops on all matters law, so that when they issue an executive order, they are not blocked by the judicial branch of the government. Okay? And then you have your administrative order. So the administrative order applies to everyone. It is issued by a national agency, let's say the DOH. So let's go back to our law about the national vaccine mandate. So uh, IRRs, also known as IRRs, or the implementing rules and regulations for specific laws, the specifics, they can come in the form of administrative orders. And all administrative orders require that they are reviewed by uh, the executive committee of the Department of Health. So it is seen by the Secretary of Health, their technical assistants, the same with the undersecretaries, the assistant secretaries, some consultants who can give inputs but have no, their decisions bear weigh no bearing on the final outcome of the administrative order, and even subdirectors involved, let's say infectious diseases or the ones in charge of the cold supply chain, they will be the ones giving inputs in the creation of the administrative order. And the administrative order has to be well publicized, so the public has to know about it. It has to be printed in a newspaper so that the public is aware. Now you're probably wondering, it has to be printed in a newspaper? Who reads a newspaper these days? Which is why rules about how IRRs or administrative orders are published need to be reviewed because they were made during a time of the traditional or legacy media. We are now in the age of new media. We are now in the age of social media. We are now in the age of digital media. And perhaps administrative orders need to be published likewise. Okay? Same goes for our, so the department order, memorandum, or circular. These are issuances that come from a national agency and applies only to personnel of the national agency. And usually they are either direct orders that say you have to wear your uniform uh, as long as you're in the office, even let's say you're only there to get your stuff because you are resigning from work or you have resigned from work, you still have to wear your uniform, although that doesn't really matter because you're no longer an employee. Okay, you have to wear Filipiniana costume on Mondays. Uh, yeah, that's a department order. Now, a department memorandum or a circular is a reminder, usually, that there exists a previous order, whether an administrative order or a department order, that needs to be enforced or needs to be followed by personnel of the agency. So our first program is the National Tuberculosis Program. It aims to reduce mortality and incidence from tuberculosis in the country, reduce the catastrophic costs, and provide patient-responsive health services. Okay. So currently, it is overseen by the National TB Coordinating Council, which enacts the Philippine Acceleration Action Plan for TB. So this is the vision mission, a TB-free Philippines. We wonder when this will be achieved to reduce the TB burden, to achieve a lowering of the catastrophic cost of TB-affected households, and to responsibly deliver TB services. Okay? So these are the definition of terms. I'm not going to read them out to you. The PowerPoint has been uploaded. The slide deck has been uploaded on Canvas. You may download it. Using I will be using the slides to get the questions from. Okay. So we have the classifications of tubercular diseases based on the bacteriologic status, whether it's bacteriologically confirmed through direct sputum smear microscopy, culture, or rapid diagnostic tests, or whether they are clinically diagnosed, and you can classify them also based on the anatomic site. These are things that you are already aware of through your other courses, so other rotations, other subjects such as pathology and your clinical subjects. Okay, so I'm not gonna read them out. So we have your new cases and your retreatment. So I will be using the slides for my questions for the unit exam and for the long exam. So the policies, if you will notice, with regards to our tuberculosis program, they are mostly administrative orders because of um, the the double burden of TB as an infection and the resources that we need to treat the increasing numbers of drug-resistant TB, as well as the possible side effects or the adverse drug reactions because of tuberculosis treatment. And health in terms of health financing, the PhilHealth benefit package with the TB dots, there is a 4,000 peso flat rate with the first payment of 2,500 pesos being given during the intensive phase, so the first 2 months, and the second payment of 1,500 pesos being given after during the maintenance phase, okay, or after the maintenance phase. You will notice that this only covers up to 6 months of treatment. And in fact, it is written there, the PhilHealth will not pay for additional services if there is extension of treatment. So that's the problem when there is cookie cutter models of treating or of financing healthcare. Okay, and yeah, and the problem is there are people who are more susceptible to dropping out, especially when they no longer have the finances. So after that 6 months, the services they will probably not be able to avail because there is no more incentive for them or no more budget for them to be able to pay for the services. And that only even makes them more susceptible into developing drug-resistant tuberculosis. So the benefit package also has the consulta package, which is not just for medical facilities but also open to non-hospital facilities such as rural health units, surgical clinics, and infirmaries. Because TB doesn't exist in a vacuum, it also includes screening and assessment, as well as initial and follow-up consultation and select laboratory tests and drugs and medicines for other diseases that the patient with tuberculosis may have, as recommended by a primary care physician. So these are some of the benefit package inclusions with people with tuberculosis. So these are the partner organizations. It's not just the Department of Health. You have the Commission on Higher Education. You have the Department of the Interior and Local Government, which oversees our municipal health offices and rural health units. The Department of Labor and Employment, the Department of Education, the Department of Social Welfare and Development, the Department of Human Settlements and Urban Development, the Department of Transportation, and even the Technical Education and Skills Development Authority. Note that this is not a complete list, okay? This is because all of the sources I have in the DOH website couldn't state all of the partner agencies outright. They only showed the seals of those specific agencies. Okay? So, but you have to consider or you have to ask, why is the Department of Human Settlements and Urban Development included there? Why is DepEd there? Why is CHED there? Why is the DOTR there? Uh, this is because tuberculosis, as we all know, it was controlled after not after we discovered tuberculosis medications, which happened around the time of World War II. So it was in the 1920s, 1930s, 1940s. Okay, there were already decreases in tuberculosis in Western nations because they realize that if you give people enough breathing space, enough living space, if you let air circulate, okay, instead of it be cramped and crowded and people just breathing all over each other in very small housing, there is there is a reduced chance of transmission of tuberculosis. Okay? So a preventive approach, an informative and preventive approach is required if we want to treat TB. Okay? Treatment success is nice, but if the person with TB still manages to transmit the disease to others in their community because of poor living conditions, then the program will only have modest success. And again, like I said, with our approaches to tuberculosis, you have to involve all manner of non-government organizations and civil service organizations, okay, including Samahang Lusog Baga, Philippine Alliance to Stop TB, Philippine Coalition Against TB. This is not a complete list, okay? And other partner organizations include USAID, which in 2024 was pledged to give 10 million US dollars to help end tuberculosis in the Philippines. So they pledged 10 million US dollars. If you know the if you know the novelist John Green, he made a tweet about that. You also have the World Health Organization, the Global Fund, the Japan International Cooperation Agency. All of these work hand in hand to provide technical assistance in helping end TB. And again, a caveat: this is not a complete list. Okay, but we have current issues with regards to the tuberculosis program. So, after the inauguration of the second Trump presidency, the richest man in the world took it upon himself to freeze programs and operations of various arms of the US government he deems are inefficient and laid off workers, including those in USAID, which helps finance our TB program and lends technical assistance in improving detection and treatment. So right now, a lot of our progress with regards to tuberculosis is uncertain. Okay? If we are going to be able to sustain it because of certain political developments. Okay? So our next program is the Dengue Prevention and Control Program. And the vision mission is a dengue-free Philippines and ensure healthy lives and promote well-being for all at all ages. The mission seems a bit vague, and I believe this is because of the transfer from the old DOH website to the new website. So the objectives to reduce dengue morbidity by at least 25% by 2022, to reduce dengue mortality by at least 50% by 2022, to maintain case fatality rate of less than 1% every year. And you'll notice that from the DOH website, this is very alarming that it's still 2022. Okay, it's already 2025. And right now, we have an outbreak of dengue in the metro. Okay? Components include surveillance through the Philippine Integrated Disease Surveillance Response, laboratory surveillance through the Research Institute in Tropical Medicine in Muntinlupa, vector surveillance through our DOH regional offices, and case management and diagnosis. So you have your clinical management guidelines training for hospitals, diagnostics through the dengue NS1 antigen test, and PCR as dengue confirmatory tests. So the program components include integrated vector management, outbreak response, health promotion, and advocacy, as well as research. So dengue is considered the fastest spreading vector-borne disease in the world. It is already endemic in 100 countries. When I was still fresh from medical school, there were three serotypes. But after I graduated and got my license to practice, a fourth serotype was discovered. So the first one is usually non-severe or asymptomatic. But the second and subsequent infections may cause severe dengue. So dengue itself, like most viral infections, has no treatment, but the disease can be easily managed. Okay, and it is transmitted by our Aedes species mosquitoes. So we have our different dengue classifications, the ones without warning signs, suspect dengue, probable, and confirmed dengue. I'm not going to read all of these out loud because these are already part of your other courses, other subjects. And then you have your dengue with warning signs and your severe dengue. And there are phases, including the febrile phase and the critical phase and the recovery phase. You have your laboratory tests, the NS1 rapid diagnostic tests, which are requested between 1 to 5 days of illness and free in all health centers and public hospitals, ideally. And you have your antibody tests. You also have your polymerase chain reaction tests and your nucleic acid amplification loop mediated amplification assay. Okay? And other tests, usually the ones that are less sensitive or less specific for dengue, include total white blood cell count and platelets. Okay, sometimes we have to rely on that. So our management is based on the groupings of patients, including Group A. So those who are ambulatory can tolerate oral fluid intake and pass urine every 6 hours. And then you have your Group B, patients who with the warning signs, okay, or have social circumstances, including living alone or far from a health facility without reliable means of transportation that require in-hospital management, or they have coexisting conditions. And your Group C are those with severe dengue requiring emergency treatment and urgent referral. So the current strategy is the 5S strategy: search and destroy mosquito nesting areas or where they lay their eggs, seek early consultation for high-grade fever, secure self-protection measures such as long-sleeved clothes, especially during the daytime or at dusk and dawn, and anti-dengue lotions and oils, vector control measures, sustained vector control measures. So here we're already moving past fogging and sustain the hydration. Hydration is important for our dengue patients. So these are the AOs, including AO 2016-0043 with regards to the rapid diagnostic tests and department memoranda. Currently, our issues with dengue, we had a chance to help lessen the impact of repeat dengue infections back in 2016, 2015, 2016. But thanks to certain personalities who have an agenda, uh, we no longer have a vaccine that is used for dengue. And in fact, for those with the means to do so, sometimes they would fly to other countries to get vaccinated for dengue because the vaccines are still available and they are very much effective in those countries, such as in Singapore. Okay. We have our rabies prevention and control program. So this one is still relatively well maintained because their vision is to eliminate human rabies by the year 2027, and I think they are looking at it with success because no new cases have been logged so far within the past year, and the mission is to declare the Philippines rabies free by the year 2030. And the goal is to eliminate rabies as a public health problem. And then you have your with rabies, you have your animal, usually dog or cat bite categories. So category 1, category 2 with its medical management, and category 3 and its corresponding management. So you have your vaccine schedule. These are intramuscular vaccines. And our source of policies with regards to rabies are from Republic Act 9482, which with the components of mass vaccination of dogs, a central database system for registering and vaccinating dogs, which we have to ask, is this really being followed? Okay? Because while for us, we can say for certain that our dogs are vaccinated because we are in an socio-economic status with privilege, how about dogs that are in the areas of informal settlers, that are in the rural areas? Okay? Do we really impound stray dogs or dogs that are not that do not have markings that say that they have an owner? Is there really an education campaign on the prevention and control of rabies? Is there a provision on pre-exposure treatment to high-risk personnel and post-exposure treatment to animal bite victims? Okay, because there are people who keep on saying rabies vaccines are already free. There is still a lot of out-of-pocket spending for vaccination for rabies for humans. Okay, and yeah. Another aspect is the routine pre-exposure for prophylaxis of school children aged 5 to 14, where there is a high incidence of rabies, and encouragement of pre-exposure vaccination and responsible pet ownership. Okay. So there's a PhilHealth benefit outpatient package for rabies and other animal bites when it comes to management. And the partner organizations are the national government, including the Department of Agriculture. They go hand in hand because the Department of Agriculture is in charge of our livestock, the DepEd, the DILG, the Food and Drug Authority, RITM, and San Lazaro Hospital. The UP College of Public Health, technically this is still a government organization, okay? And the World Health Organization. Our next program is the Malaria Control and Elimination Program. with a vision of having Philippines free of malaria by 2013. Again, it states 2022 in the website. Malaria will have been interrupted in all provinces except Palawan. 75 provinces will be declared malaria-free, and the number of indigenous malaria cases will be reduced to less than 1,200 by at least 75% relative to 2018. So malaria is a parasitic disease caused by a protista, okay, that reproduces in mosquitoes, inside human red blood cells, and in the liver cells. Okay, it is transmitted by female Anopheles mosquitoes and reproduce inside our red blood cells, then burst the cells, releasing substances. So it's like hemolysis that induce chills, fever, and sweating. And this is cyclic, so you have your tertan or every 48 hours and quartan every 72 hours fever. And there are 4 species of human malaria. 70% of the cases in our country are Plasmodium falciparum. And these are responsible for severe or complicated malaria, and they cause mortalities. 30% of the cases in the Philippines are Plasmodium vivax. There have been cases of Plasmodium ovale in the Visayas and Plasmodium malaria in Palawan itself, but these were decades ago. Okay, now the only place considered endemic for malaria is Palawan. So diagnosis is through thick and thin peripheral blood smears stained by Giemsa or field stain or Leishman stain for the thin films. Rapid diagnostic tests utilize the malarial antigen in the blood of the patient and usually available within 15 to 20 minutes. So this is the treatment for malaria. I'm not going to read it out. And the policies include AO 2021-0003. So it also includes our filariasis because, again, malaria and filariasis both have the same vectors. Okay, so mosquitoes. Okay, so this is the timeline of the current policies. The types of service offered for malaria include online training on malaria elimination surveillance strategy and tools, basic malaria microscopy training, and intensive malaria microscopy training for medical technologists. These are the partner organizations. Again, not a complete list. So our next is filariasis, with the vision of a healthy and productive individuals and families for a filariasis-free Philippines, and the mission of eliminating filariasis as a public health problem through a comprehensive approach and universal access to quality health services. You're probably wondering, these are such generalized vision mission. They might be generated by AI, and it was probably generated over a workshop, okay, usually by the same people who are copying each other. So filariasis, formerly known as elephantiasis, because of the way the symptoms or its manifestation, because of the lymphatic blockage or obstruction, uh, the that the appendages of the patient would resemble the legs of an elephant. Okay, the parasites are nematodes of the family Filaridae, which nest in lymphatic vessels that disrupt the normal function of the lymphatic system. So 90% of our cases are Wuchereria bancrofti, and 10% is Bruchia malayi. So the microfilariae are transmitted through mosquitoes, usually Anopheles and Culex, sometimes Aedes, pero usually it's Anopheles and Culex, where they mature into larvae. Okay, so these are the symptoms. And this is the treatment. Okay. So these are the policies. You have your executive order 036 line, so a rare case. And the services that are used, including morbidity management and disability prevention, orientation of dossier preparation for lymphatic filariasis elimination online course, orientation on transmission assessment survey, and orientation on usage of the filariasis test strip, and orientation of post-validation surveillance. These are our partner organizations. Again, not a complete list. So schistosomiasis, it's the same almost with the vision and mission. Schistosomiasis is an acute and chronic parasitic disease caused by blood fluke. So these are parasites again, by trematodes, okay? And the host, okay, released by freshwater snails, okay? So the intermediate hosts are our freshwater snails, whereas we are the definitive host because they are the adults that are able to sexually reproduce. Okay, so the majority of our schistosomiasis cases in the Philippines are Schistosoma japonicum. Okay, and the snail host is Oncomelania. So schistosomiasis diagnostics use the two-stool examination using the Cato-Katz technique. Or if this is if both stool thick smears are negative, so fecal specimens are negative, we either use rectal biopsy and ultrasound or COPT. Okay. And this is the treatment for schistosomiasis. And these are the policies, including Republic Act 4539, the National Schistosomiasis Control Commission, the revised management and prevention of schistosomiasis through an administrative order. These are our partner organizations. Our next program is the National Leprosy Program, and it envisions a leprosy-free Philippines by the year 2022? Question mark, question mark, question mark. Okay. So leprosy is caused by mycobacteria, which is the genus similar to the ones that cause tuberculosis. Okay. Transmitted through droplets from the nose and mouth, and not spread through casual contact. Okay, so one of the fears back then about leprosy was that if you touch a leper, you will get leprosy. But in reality, the transmission is from droplets from the person's nose and mouth. And the disease affects the skin, peripheral nerves, and mucosa of the respiratory tract and the eyes. So there's physical deformity and also facial stigmatization and discrimination. Okay. So diagnosis by usually with one of the following signs: loss of sensation in a hypopigmented or reddish skin patch, a thickened or enlarged peripheral nerve with loss of sensation or weakness of the muscles, or detection of bacilli in a slit skin smear. And you have your possible bacillary, so only 1 to 5 skin lesions without presence of bacilli in the skin smear, or multibacillary, case of leprosy with more than 5 skin lesions or with nerve involvement and with the demonstration of bacilli in the slit skin smear. Okay. And these are our field classification of leprosy. This is the treatment. Okay. So similar to our anti-tuberculosis treatment, there's 6 months for the bacillari. Multi-drug therapy kills the pathogen and cures the patient, so it's important to diagnose early and promptly initiate treatment to prevent disabilities. So these are our policies: AO 2021-004, updated guidelines on the treatment and prevention of leprosy in the Philippines. And these are the program components, including early detection and treatment, integrated leprosy services, referral system, case detection and diagnosis, advocacy focusing on stigma, discrimination and reduction, prevention of deformity, self-care and rehabilitation, recording and reporting, monitoring, supervision, and evaluation. Now, there's a possibility that we may actually be on track with being able to control leprosy, because for several years we were required to wear facial coverings, so mouth and nose coverings, to prevent the transmission of COVID. So there might be an additional benefit for masking up. Okay. So these are our policies and laws. So RA 4073. So an act further liberalizing the treatment of leprosy by amending and repealing certain sections of the revised administrative code. There's also a presidential decree declaring the last week of February of every year as Leprosy Week. So this past week was Leprosy Week. Okay. AO 2000 -0005, guidelines on the integration of leprosy services in hospitals. And these are the current strategies. So there's a World Leprosy Day, January 31, and the Leprosy Week, which is the last week of February. And these are the partner institutions, mostly private or non-government organizations. The next is our HIV, AIDS, and STI prevention and control program, with the vision of achieving zero new infections, zero discrimination, and zero AIDS-related death, and to improve access and utilization of preventive primary healthcare services for HIVs and sexually transmitted infections. Oh, once again, 2022 comes. So you have your policies, AO 2017-0019, AO 2019-0001, which implementation of the rapid HIV diagnostic algorithm. AO 2019-0016, policies and guidelines on the prevention of mother-to-child transmission of HIV. And guidelines on tuberculosis HIV services integration for universal healthcare. So the latest, the administrative order. So these are our types of services, benefits for drugs and medicines, laboratory examinations, professional fees, trainings, including HIV counseling and testing training. Okay. And these are our current issues. Again, after USAID. So a lot of our, a lot of you were born in the years after. Sorry, a lot of you were already born, if I'm correct, in the 21st century. The cohort of your class has few who were born in the 20th century. So you were born during the time of George W. Bush. Now, for those of us who are, who remember, or those of us who were already adults back then, George W. Bush is considered a war criminal after the US invasion of Iraq and after the occupation of Afghanistan. Okay? A lot of people consider George W. Bush a monster. But a lot of areas of Africa where HIV is endemic, he is actually considered a hero because he was the one who was able to control HIV, especially the growing numbers in Africa, through the USAID. The only country where cases of HIV infection were increasing until the COVID-19 pandemic. Actually, I'm not sure now. I haven't seen the numbers if it's still increasing, but was this country. Okay? And a lot of our technologies, a lot of our capacity building comes from the USAID. And thanks to the second Trump presidency, all of this is uncertain. Progress with regards to being able to control HIV is uncertain because of the whims of the most powerful man on earth and the person he has entrusted to try to make the American government more efficient. You have your water safety program through cholera and which controls for cholera and typhoid diseases. So cholera is caused by Vibrio cholera, the bacterium transmitted through the fecal-oral route. It produces an enterotoxin that promotes secretion of fluids and electrolytes into the lumen of the small intestine. Okay. So these are the symptoms: painless, profuse, watery diarrhea with vomiting, usually no fever, 24 to 48-hour incubation period. Okay. So these are the this is the treatment for cholera. Meanwhile, typhoid fever is caused by Salmonella typhi. And these are the symptoms and treatment. And these are the policies with regards to our food and water safety. So you have Republic Act 10611, which is the Food Safety Act. RA 9003, Ecological Solid Waste Management Program, and PD 856, which is the Sanitation Code of the Philippines. Services include PhilHealth benefit packages, like the cholera and typhoid packages, as well as trainings for rapid diagnostic tests for surveillance and outbreak response, CPGs on acute infectious diarrhea, and food and water disease containment procedures. Okay, and these are the national part. These are our partner organizations. Pretty straightforward. You have your emerging and re-emerging infectious diseases. These are their vision, mission, and their goals. So the ARAID usually is the one initially in charge of diseases such as MERS-CoV, SARS-CoV-2, novel zoonosis like Hendra virus or Nipah virus. Okay. Leptospirosis is currently under the ARAID. As is coronavirus disease 2019. So these are the policies: AO 0010 BSA, creating the Philippine Interagency Committee on Zoonosis and Interagency Task Force for the Management of Emerging Infectious Diseases in the Philippines. These are the partner organizations. This is the World Health Organization Health Systems framework, which includes 6 building blocks of health: service delivery, a well-trained health workforce, the use of information and information technology to enhance health services, the correct and proper medical products and technologies or health technologies, financing and leadership, which when Given full access coverage for all that are vulnerable, as well as the proper quality and safety regulations, will lead to improved health, improved responsiveness, improved financial risk and social risk protection, and improved efficiency. Okay? So these are the social determinants of health. Okay? Just as a brief reminder. Thank you very much, and we'll see each other in the Q&A.